This week, Yasser Rasheed, Director of Intel Corporation, will be discussing protecting your environment with the Intel vPro platform. Next up, Omer Taran, CTO and co-founder of CyberReady, will join us to talk about overcoming challenges in multinational simulations. In the enterprise news, funding from Material, Security, Abnormal, Teleport, Tailscale, Small Step, Phylum, and more. Acquisitions this week include HDiv Security and Radiflow. New announcements from Siren, Corelight, Arctic Wolf, Onapsis, and in other news, South Koreans are to become 1 year younger. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
DeepWatch helps secure the digital economy by protecting and defending enterprise networks everywhere, every day. DeepWatch leverages its highly automated cloud-based SOC platform backed by a world-class team of experts who monitor, detect, and respond to threats on customers' digital assets 24/7, 365. Many of the world's leading brands rely on DeepWatch's managed detection and response. Visit securityweekly.com/DeepWatch to learn more. CyberArk is at the forefront of demonstrating how identity security can help prevent and block a ransomware infection before it brings a business down. CyberArk offers protection along every aspect of the attack chain, from the initial intrusion all the way through data exfiltration. Whether you are proactively building your security program or need to restore trust in your IT environment, CyberArk has the experience to help. Learn how at securityweekly.com/CyberArk.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly. This is episode number 273, being recorded live here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I am not Adrian Sanabria. I am Paul Asadorian, filling in for Adrian this week. And here in studio with Mr. Matt Alderman.
2 days in a row.
It's really strange.
I haven't done 3 podcasts in a week, and I don't know how long, Paul.
It's just really strange how all our schedules kind of worked out.
It did for this.
But good that we can all cover each other's shows. On the lines remotely, Mr. Lee Neely is here with us.
Good to be here on a Thursday afternoon, but it's not the 13th yet.
And I think this might be my first podcast with KT as a co-host.
I think so.
KT, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yes,
virtually, but
I know,
but
right?
Still see you. Yeah.
You have to come down to studio one of these days for Enterprise Security Weekly, and I'll sit in and stuff. It'd be fun.
It's not that far.
That's right. Yeah, just up in Boston. So, let's see. A couple of announcements. Is that what I have? Yes,
probably.
I do. My teleprompter's a little slow today, as am I. As is the person reading it. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe and subscribe to all of our podcasts on the network, as well as check out some of our episode starter packs. So there are 3 playlists on Spotify that represent some of the gems in our archive. So I've put together some Security Weekly hits, some roundtable discussions, and other things. So you can go check those out. As you know, there's thousands of episodes of Security Weekly. So to distill some of those down in some easily digestible playlists, I thought was a good idea. So make sure you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. This segment is sponsored by Intel. To learn more about Intel and Intel's vPro platform, please visit securityweekly.com/Intel. Joining us for this segment is Yasser Rasheed. Yasser is the Global Director of Enterprise Client Sales at Intel, focusing primarily on Intel vPro and Intel's sales initiative. Yasser joins us to discuss how you can protect your environment with Intel's vPro platform. Yasser, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. We're glad to be here.
And Yasser, you've been at Intel over 22 years, is that correct?
Yes, correct. I started at the age of 3.
Yeah, you're great for 32. It's awesome. That's a long time to be with the company. That's actually telling in and of itself. You know, obviously you must really enjoy working at Intel. So that's really cool.
I do, and amazingly, actually, there are many folks who have been at Intel for a lot longer than that. So
yeah, that's awesome. So, Yasser, I'll get started and ask you, we're going to focus on the vPro platform from Intel today in this segment. I guess just start, if those who may not be familiar with vPro, what is Intel vPro?
Yeah, great question, Paul. So, back in the days, back in 2005 or 6, we were thinking about what is the best business-ready PC, and we looked at what business users need and business IT professionals, and we really focused on 4 pillars. Those are the productivity and user experience, security, manageability, and stability, and these are what the collection of hardware and software that the vPro platform brings to the table. And we work with our ecosystem partners from the OEM side, from the OS vendors and the ISVs to bring that user experience to the forefront.
Mm-hmm. How does it help systems administrators keep up to date with patches? And I guess also, describe kind of the architecture. Like, is it just really built in? Is there software like a client running on my PC?
Right. Yeah. So, vPro platforms are designed to be the PCs that deliver that user experience for end users, as well as what the IT administration needs in terms of security and manageability and those capabilities. And one aspect of that is to be able to manage those systems and patch them and update them remotely. So what we have is the hardware infrastructure and instrumentation in the hardware built in that ships with every platform, but you need the rest of the infrastructure, which Intel offers as standalone products as well as plugins into your management infrastructure so that you can continuously patch and update those systems. It's a technology that we call active management technology inside all vPro platforms. And we offer the tools such as the console, we call it EMA, or Enhanced Management Assistant.
And when you're speaking of patches, it's not just patches for the operating system or things like that. There's also lots of computers inside your computer that we lovingly call firmware, which is a very overloaded term. vPro also helps with applying firmware updates. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's exactly true. And, patches here go from the firmware updates if something needs to be changed and updated in the chipset, for example, any of the firmware that runs on the chipset, any microcode updates, all the way up to drivers and OS patches and sometimes even ISV patches as well. So,
yeah. And that's important to have the whole stack, especially, when we talk about firmware. I know Intel just released, I believe it was 16 bulletins covering 41 different vulnerabilities that you found both internally as well as collaborations with external security researchers. And many of these were firmware based and at very low level systems. Why is it important to address these systems from your perspective for our audience?
Yeah, and Paul, we take security very seriously at Intel. We've been investing heavily in identifying our own product vulnerabilities. Over the last 3 years, we've discovered more than 90% of the vulnerabilities that are out there in our products ahead of anyone else in the market. And would rather be the ones discovering them and patching them and updating our systems before it even gets in the bad hands, if you will. So from that point of view, we have our bug bounty program, and we have our investment with our own researchers inside Intel and outside of Intel, covering products that go all the way from hardware updates all the way up, working with the ecosystem for drivers and patches in the operating system and so on. And yes, some of them are in the firmware. We want to get ahead of the curve, if you will, and be proactive in approaching these vulnerabilities.
Patching and updating firmware is very tricky business, and it's also one of those avenues that some attackers will use in order to write bad things into your firmware. Now, is Intel's boot guard and BIOS guard, is that part of vPro? Is that tied together?
Yes, and to make it simpler, what we did is we created a bundle, a package that we call Intel Hardware Shield that covers really 3 aspects. At the bottom layer, it's what we call enhanced or built-in security, and this is really the firmware security, the advancements on the firmware level to protect itself and protect the operating system. And then on top of it, we have data and application level protections. And then at the top of that, advanced threat protections. So these are the three components of what we call Intel Hardware Shield, which is offered on vPro platforms, built in the platform, and of course, in partnership with the ecosystem partners. BootGuard is part of that lowest layer of hardware shield, as well as many other capabilities that protect the boot process. What's most important for an attacker, if they want to circumvent any operating system or software protections, is to go below the OS. And we want to protect against that, especially the boot process. We want to verify that it's done in the right way, and it's booting to a verifiable entity, which is the operating system. And then we can hand over to the OS and hand over some reports to the OS about the level of protection below the OS itself.
I read this as, and I did some digging into your technical documentation. I'll summarize at a high level. It greatly reduces the attack surface inside of the firmware and inside of the subsystem components that attackers would go after to, like you said, circumvent those protections to get ahead of the operating system. I also validated that with some of my friends, and they felt the same way that I did as well. And my friends do this for a living in this aspect of security. So you got the seal of approval across the board, Yasser, for the security protections at this very low level. Now, well, we could go much deeper into that area, but I also want to talk about the importance of security at the reporting layer as well, because it's one thing to have these really great technical controls, and that's awesome, but there has to be some kind of reporting right back to the IT team to know what needs to be fixed, what has been fixed, in all of the different points of basically telemetry. And I'm assuming that's included in vPro, correct?
Absolutely, and the first level here is to we embed the functionality, but it's, as you said, it's not just that. How do we report to the operating system so that it knows it's loading on top of clean hardware? And that's the first level, is that interface between the hardware and the software in that case. And we worked with Microsoft on that, and we have it already implemented in vPro. The next level we're looking at is what type of telemetry can we expose to IT administration, and there are multiple levels for that as well. And where we have the basic level already implemented in vPro today, and we continue to advance that. And for those who just attended the Intel Vision event, you may have heard about our Trust as a Service initiative, and it's a vision that we're taking the first steps to allow remote systems to attest to the trusted execution environment in our hardware. So it's a journey. We're on the very first few steps, but we're way ahead of the attackers from that point of view, and that's where we want to continue to be.
Because there's a signing in a trust-based system, right, that helps reduce. I don't know what that was, but it helps reduce the attack surface, correct?
Yes. Let me. I don't want to get too deep on the technical, but let me explain it in simple terms. The most important and critical component of the firmware in the BIOS is the boot block. This is the first set of code that runs after hardware reset. And for that to be verified, what we use is the hardware itself in a completely separate environment. We verify the signature of the boot block. So from the get-go, as soon as you reset that system, you know that you're starting the boot process in a clean way. And of course, we use our internal hardware capabilities to verify that signature, so it's not accessible to anyone, any code injected, if you will, in the BIOS. Once you have starting point.
For those who are going to maybe go read more on this, that's in system management mode, or SMM, that all of that, what you described is happening, correct?
Yes, and even before we get to SMM continues all the way through runtime, and some attackers today can use a bad driver to get into SMM and kind of take hold of below the OS, and we protect against those attacks.
Fantastic. So tell us about some of the reporting, right? Because, people have tens of thousands of systems out there, and inside of your computer, starting with the hardware, you've got multiple firmwares, multiple little operating systems that need to be, so it's an exponential problem. How do I get that telemetry back to the systems administrators to allow them to easily start addressing some of these issues, both in firmware and maybe also in some of the drivers as well, as we kind of move up the stack?
So there are at a high level, there are two levels for the reporting. One is, do you have the right systems that have the capabilities?
Mm-hmm.
Two, do you have those capabilities turned on and being utilized? And we cover both of them with our Intel Active Management technology and the ability to have that report exposed remotely and securely to an IT console. The first step is what we call discovery. Usually you discover that you have the latest and greatest hardware and has the capabilities that we talk about, like boot guard and some of the basic built-in security that we have at the lowest level. And then whether each feature is being utilized or not, that's also a setup that we pass on to the operating system, because the operating system is in control here on what to turn on and whatnot in most cases. And those reports can be also exposed to an IT console.
And how does it help? I mean, I think where we stand today, from what I've been reading and hearing from folks with working from home versus working in the office, that largely many are still working from home, and then like the greatest sector after that is in this hybrid work mode, right, where they're working a few days a week in the office and a few days a week at home. How does vPro help me both with the remote work and the hybrid work kind of situations, Yasser?
Yes. So great question. When we put vPro together, there was no pandemic, there was no COVID, and we always used to get the question, well, I'm protecting behind my firewall, and I'm kind of protected, I'm okay. And what we realized is, first, mobility, right? People move around, and then with the COVID and the pandemic, everyone was working from home, including IT system administrators, right? And all of a sudden, the attack surface exploded. It's everywhere. It's IT administrators needed to protect home environments, a home network that is shared by a teenager playing games and maybe a couple of household members working. So the attack surface is everywhere. Access to those PCs, even for IT administrators, became remote, and we needed those tools. The good news is vPro had all of this built in already. Right. And whether you're doing the regular patching and updates, whether you're doing troubleshooting, whether you're doing, some simple repairs, re-imaging a PC when something goes wrong. Imagine someone clicking on a bad link and getting ransomware, or, discovering that their machine is running overnight and there's a cryptojacking attack going on. Yeah, all of this can now remediate remotely.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. So we were talking recently about destructive malware, and there's also a lot of other reasons why you might need to rebuild a PC. I mean, most of us have been around technology for a really long time on the show and listening. We know that sometimes you got to rebuild a PC. How does vPro help IT administrators do that?
Yeah, so vPro has the capability below the operating system to bring in, to kind of start from scratch, right? Go fetch a new image, or it's usually the beginning of that OS image from a well-known source and verify the source. Essentially, it's all secure. You bring that down to the PC and you start the rebuilding. And then once that image is there, you can start the customization and personalization. And all of this could be done remotely. And if you have a good network connection, you could do this in maybe a couple of hours, and you're back with a clean slate. That depends on having the right backup. And I always encourage my customers and partners in the industry to first have the right backup infrastructure, and of course, implement the capabilities inside vPro platforms. We've seen a surge in the last couple of years because of COVID to utilize the vPro capabilities, because everything went remote and hybrid work is here to stay. So we know that this is not just a blip in the system.
Yeah, I'm glad you described that for us, because we were kind of speculating in another discussion about how you would remotely rebuild computers if something were to go wrong with the hard drive or the OS image on the hard drive. Maybe not physically, because if something physically goes wrong, you still have to get a new hard drive out to the person. But what you described was you could then remotely rebuild on new hardware if you had to, or existing hardware remotely. And securely, and that's where we were kind of speculating. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and the vast majority of the challenges today for IT do not require a physical, touch, if you will, right? If you have the right infrastructure to do it remote, you can cover, I would say, between 70 and 80% of IT challenges.
With Intel's 12th gen processor, I think we already covered some of I kind of know the answer because we covered it, right? But in 12th gen, there are security enhancements, some of which we talked about. Are there ones that we haven't covered?
Yes. So again, there are 3 levels under Intel Hardware Shield. Plus, we have the Intel Active Management technology for the ability to troubleshoot and work remotely. To simplify the story, we always say, hey, there are 3 functions that any Chief Information Security Officer or the InfoSec team need to implement: protect, detect, and correct. Right. And on the protection side, we have the right infrastructure working with Microsoft as a partner for virtualization-based security, protect application and data based on our enhanced virtualization infrastructure in the hardware. And we continue to add new capabilities. And in the 12th gen, we added some capabilities that accelerate the transition between virtual machines, which helps with the transition between the secure virtual machine and the regular OS virtual machine.
Right. Yeah. So separation between the operating system and your virtual environments and between virtual environments. Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's critical going forward. We believe this is, so critical for doing security in the right way on every endpoint. So we talked about built-in security foundation, if you will, in the firmware, the protection of application and data. The top layer of Hardware Shield is all about advanced threat protections, which starts with changing from signature-based detection to behavioral detection. And we utilize the telemetry from the hardware. We utilize our AI-based capabilities with heuristics to trap on malicious or sometimes suspicious behavior of any piece of software. And that is so critical to catch, some of the supply chain attacks that we've seen in the market recently. It's important to trap on new zero-day attacks. Everyone is talking about zero trust. You cannot implement zero trust without the assistance from the hardware from that point of view. And for 12th gen, we continue to have new heuristics introduced in our solutions. It's part of Hardware Shield. And we continue to partner with big security vendors in the industry, starting with Microsoft on the Defender side. But we have a long list now of supporters in the ISV community.
That's awesome. What have you been hearing from your users about performance and or security kind of case studies?
Performance is bread and butter of what PCs deliver. And for any end user, if they have to choose between the productivity and them being productive and profitable versus, protecting their environment, unfortunately, they will choose, I want my system to be productive and I'll wait on the security piece. The reality is they go hand in hand. And that's exactly what vPro delivers. The right performance and productivity capabilities that the end user can focus on and doing the majority of the security work behind the scenes. For example, our threat detection capability now utilizes our advanced graphics engine to offload the majority of those, detection capability to the graphics engine, which is usually underutilized in a business setting. Someone is playing games, and in that case, they are utilizing their graphics engine well.
But some of the onboard Intel graphics coprocessors today, or GPUs, right, are really good. Your gamers, right, are going to want more capabilities there. But like you said, in the business users, often that chipset is underutilized. But the recent ones that I was looking at, I'm like, those are actually really good.
Totally, and we've done this on purpose so that many new tools today, whether you're a content creator or just a regular user, you do benefit from a stronger graphics, and we wanted that to be integrated. So every vPro platform from Intel now comes with a high-end graphics integrated high-end, not a gaming level, but definitely more than what you need for a regular business utilization.
And you're utilizing that graphics, the onboard GPU, for security-related tasks.
Yes, and the beauty of it is twofold. So first, it's underutilized. You have the right MIPS. But more importantly, it is designed for parallel workloads. In other words, it's super efficient from a both power and performance points of view to access the right. It's the same memory that is utilized by the CPU, and it can do the detection in parallel on the side without impacting the utilization of the main CPU. So it's very powerful from that point of view, and we can apply a lot of advanced AI techniques from that angle.
That's awesome. vPro support across processors. So folks are out there listening, and now, of course, you're saying, I want my processors to support vPro because I want to use this awesome technology. What's your guidance there, Yasser, when people start selecting maybe your new round of laptop refreshes?
Yeah, the vast majority of our top OEMs now offer vPro platforms, and those are Core i5 and Core i7, but you need to look for Core i5 vPro or Core i7 vPro. Mm-hmm. We also have Core i9 vPro for those who require heavy-duty workloads and so on. It's offered on our workstation series now. We even have Google Chrome, essentially now Chrome OS offering vPro, so you can buy a Chromebook with vPro capabilities, and vPro is there now. You have the choice for many CPU offerings from Intel, and of course coupled with the right systems from the OEMs.
And Yasser, you mentioned a strong partnership with Microsoft. For organizations that may mix in macOS and or Linux, how does that integrate with vPro?
Yeah, so Mac OS today does not support vPro, and that is a choice that any IT environment will need to make. Right, we've been working with Microsoft on the Windows side, with Google on the Chrome side, and we're very proud of the partnership that we had with Microsoft and with Google.
I think that's most organizations today, right? Windows is still the primary operating system of choice.
To a very large degree, Windows is there, and of course on the education side, you see Chrome OS in certain geographies, but the vast majority is Windows operating system. And from that point of view, we support, of course, both the Windows 10 and Windows 11. We encourage everyone to move to Windows 11, but we know that it takes time, especially for large enterprises. So we're supporting both, and we'll continue to do so, in alignment with Microsoft plans.
Matt, Lee, KT, any final questions?
No, that was a great segment. That was a lot of great information.
Yeah. I mean, the question I'd been sitting on is, when can I put it in my life cycle plan? But if you guys are already out there, I'm thinking we ought to be, taking a hard look when we're doing our procurements to make sure we've got the vPro option in there.
Yeah, and by the way, Intel is always happy to help. We have our technical experts to help you if you're considering new options. We don't have direct products really in this space. We work with the OEMs, but so we have the luxury of offering advice and supporting your needs.
Very cool.
Outstanding. So people can visit securityweekly.com/Intel to learn more. I also encourage folks to visit the Intel, do you call it the Security Center, where the advisories were posted? I know, this is a cybersecurity audience. I thought they were all very well written, very well described on there and listed out, in order on the site. So that's also a good resource to see, what updates you may or may not be applying based on which products that you have. And they weren't all firmware based, right? Some of it was also kind of driver and software based as well.
Yes, correct.
Outstanding. Yasser, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you.
Don't forget to visit securityweekly.com/Intel to learn more. Coming up next, Omer from CyberReady.